3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Welcome to Mission CTRL, Peralta Design's podcast on all things branding and digital marketing. Since 2008, Peralta Design has launched hundreds of brands with award-winning identities and websites. Join our hosts Ramon and Jorge as they use decades of combined experience to tackle topics with past clients, industry partners, and the rest of the PD crew. At Peralta Design, we launch brands. But for now, let's launch right into this episode of Mission CTRL.
Hey everybody, welcome to Mission CTRL, where we respect the grind and reclaim the American dream. I am your host, Ramon Peralta with Peralta Design, and we launch brands. Today's guest is a global citizen. He's a photographer and a fellow creative, but most importantly, he believes in the mission of helping those less fortunate, and that mission has taken him all across the globe. He's in charge of special projects at Microboard Processing. It's an outstanding company right here in the Valley. Please help me welcome Mr. Lee Cantelon. Welcome, Lee.
Hey, thanks, Ramon. Oh, wow, there's applause and everything.
We've got a live studio audience here.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah. So tell us, Lee, tell us all about you. What is your backstory?
Well, first of all, I'm really glad to be here. And, I'm saying all those things one normally says when you're trying to think of, like, what am I supposed to say next? But no, I got to know Ramon a while ago and really have enjoyed just the interaction we've had. Love what you do. I'm just putting out a shout for PD, Peralta Designs, really good. And they've got a great color red. I came to Microboard, talking about present day. I came to Microboard. I've known the founder since 1986. And for a while, I served, on different projects for Craig Hokinga, who founded the company. And then in 2011, through a very non-structured, non-thought-out, planned path, found myself back in Connecticut. And then in just a very short period after that, working with Craig. The thing that makes his story so unique is that in 1983, when he was founding Microboard, it was called MPI back in the day, he made a decision, and he would kid about it a little bit, that say, when I first made that decision, it was easier because we really didn't have anything. We were starting this company from scratch. And he said, I made a decision that at the end of every fiscal year, I would give 100% of the profits to humanitarian efforts, to missions, and helping the poorest of the poor. And that path that he took was very, it was self-revelatory for him, because he was discovering a lot about what that type of radical involvement means. And, it took him on a really interesting path and journey. And, I became part of it as a friend, and also involved with him on some of those projects, back in the 90s. And then fast forward today, Craig passed away April 29 last year, 2021. And, the legacy that he left, that solid commitment to being involved in world service, is really strong today. He built it to a place of real strength. We're involved with 9 different projects, and we are a relational-based NGO, I'd say, in the sense that the relationships with the people we work with come first, and the programs and projects are the fruit of those relationships. So it's, in that sense, without getting fancy, it's a holistic type of involvement. We're very much boots on the ground. We visit and spend time with all the places that we're involved in Africa, India, and Central and South America. And it's quite a diverse, I'd say it's a diverse portfolio of projects that we work with, but there's a very strong common thread, which is assisting vulnerable, at-risk, displaced persons, refugees, orphans, widows that are in conflict areas, with resettlement, with rehabilitation much of the time, trauma workshops, and then all of the ancillary things that are necessary in that equation, which would be housing, food, water, education. And we just recently are starting quite a large animal husbandry project. Our first footprint for that is Nigeria. It's called Sandy's Helpers, and it's that thing it just took off. It's only about 6 months old, and we're really excited about the reception and also the type of involvement, the type of people. We have a great team.
Awesome. I mean, I believe the universe brings people together, and I'm fascinated with Craig's story and just the fact that he took all of that to create something where 100% of the profits, 100%. Everybody says partial proceeds go to blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So why do you think you got connected to Craig, and how did that happen? Because I don't believe in coincidences, so obviously your values had to have aligned, but were you introduced, or how did you guys meet?
Yeah, I met Craig. My father was very involved in missions and humanitarian work, and at the beginning, at the very outset, really, of Craig's path, they became friends, and they used to mentor dialogue back and forth, and kind of work out the equation of how this kind of radical commitment might look. Mm-hmm. And so I was introduced to Craig through my father, and then we became friends, and we became very close. Many of the projects that he was doing at the time, I'd be the one that would take off and go out in the field and report back on a number of them anyway. And I was, meanwhile, on my own trajectory. I was out in LA, and I was doing a lot of things not related to this type of work. But I always had that desire to volunteer and go and do special projects like this. I'd get restless, and I'd go, I want to do something. I got to, it's almost searching for meaning. It's not that you come with a bunch of solutions, but you go, I can find meaning in my life through stepping out and doing something that I'm not, that isn't the most comfortable thing. Get outside your comfort zone. Someone said once, you haven't really lived fully until you've been able to help someone who has no way of repaying you.
Right.
And that's a rush, and just on a real selfish level, it was like, I once you've done that a few times, and I think that's true with a lot of people that get involved in social consciousness and type of projects like these, or you feel like you're the one receiving. I'm trying to help a situation and help someone, but wow, I almost feel guilty that I'm getting such a big return. Mm-hmm. And it's not that you do it for that, but there is definitely the hand that gives gathers. And it's an amazing thing. I went to Rwanda in 1994 during the genocide.
Wow.
I was editing a music video, and I was with some friends, and I was reading a newspaper in a lounge at a studio doing a music video, out in LA. Not wasn't like in a church or in a monastery.
What kind of music?
I was doing a lot of work with Warner Music Group. Okay. So we were doing, specifically with DGC also, which back in the day was doing a lot of great music, and until after Kurt Cobain killed himself, then DGC folded. That's a whole different story. But I was reading this newspaper article, and it was about this genocide, and suddenly I just emotionally broke down, and I went, I gotta go. And I went 3 days later. Wow. I didn't plan it out much.
What's it like? A white guy lands in an African airport, like in the middle of a genocide.
Oh,
what is that like?
Yeah, well, you can't really. I was going to say you can't prepare for it. I was not totally prepared for it. I know there were guys on the ground that had, Danish Refugee Council and people from the Commission on Refugees. Those people were braced for it, but that particular historical event has no precedent. There had never been anything like it, so it's also why for years later there was not much written or spoken about it.
I did see the Hotel Rwanda. Was that an accurate depiction?
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
That was a really good, and it came out, but that's a good example because that film came out many years after. They call it the years of silence. There were about 8 years when even some very seasoned writers said, I can't tackle this one. I landed in Nairobi. I got on hitched a flight to Goma, which is now in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I was in Goma for the first part of the experience and then was down in Bukavu for the second half of the time I was there. Getting out was crazy. I had to walk for 3 days. There was all kinds of, it was an amazing experience. And there was a lot of, I didn't know about PTSD, but I know that when I got back to LA, I was really affected by the time there. Later, I think
Did you see bloodshed? Well,
yeah.
Wow.
No, you couldn't really get away from it.
Right.
There were almost 900,000 people killed in 3 months.
Oh my God.
In a very small, land space. So it was pretty horrific.
Yeah. So when you are received there, you're under the auspice of what? You're representing a company. You're representing a mission. Because I imagine they have, like you said, there's people there on the ground. There's probably Red Cross, some other organizations. But are you at that point identified as an American or affiliated with any corporation?
No, I would be, a kind of vigilante volunteer.
Okay.
So, which there actually were quite a few.
Good global citizen.
There were quite a few
yeah.
photographers and people that had come also from very small organizations. And we would just go in the morning to a briefing. It was at this place called the Hotel Nacional. And there would be the Commission on Refugees, the UNHCR. Their director on ground would just basically hand out paper. And they would quickly start targeting up groups and say, okay, we're doing a rogue camp or we're doing this, and you would kind of volunteer, raise your hand, I'm keen to go on that one. Mm-hmm. So we had nonstop activity. It was pretty amazing. But I would like to think that jumping in the deep end, because that was I'd like to be respectful of that in everything we do now, that we try to have that same type of commitment. We're all in. And I think with MicroBorg, when I began to direct the program more, one of the things that I wanted to put in motion was I don't want to be the authority here, because God has already, as I see it, God has already called, or the universe, but I choose to say God has done it, has already called people from all walks of life to be amazing directors and do things on the ground, working with the local situation, building local infrastructures. And I don't want to go in as a visitor and try and start something. I want to identify what are projects that we can align with, and that where we can be effective in helping them. And that help may be just simply fundraising, but it could also be other types of things that come from it, like sitting down with militant chiefs. That I've done that in the last how many years? Wow. I started in 2017 doing that.
How many languages can you speak?
I'm really handicapped in Nigeria. They've got 600 languages there.
Wow.
I don't speak Hausa other than to say thank you. And I know about 10 words in Fulfulde, which is the Fulani nomadic people language. But I also lucked out a bit because Nigeria was a British colony till 1960. So English medium is what they teach in school. But once you get out of the cities, you definitely need a translator.
Now, you're there, this is funded by Microboard.
Yes.
The mission.
Yes.
From what I know of Craig's story, he's very Christian based. Are you spreading the gospel as well while you're there, or no?
My role, I think, is best summed up by St. Francis. Preach the gospel in everything you do. Mm-hmm. Use words only when necessary.
Right.
So I think, the first call is when you go into these places is you are so confronted with immediate need. There's really not time to have a evangelistic service because you're looking at situations like you've got hundreds and thousands. I mean, Democratic Republic, you've got 5 million people that have been displaced over the last few years. Wow. So and to be displaced, I mean, that's a nice word. It's sort of a tidy word. It's basically saying
uprooted.
Don't go home tonight.
Right.
Just leave your office with what you're wearing, head out, and see how it works out for you. Because basically, and then also dealing with places where there's insurgencies. So you also have the question of people being held hostage and refugees, and the need is so much in front of you. And saying that, I'd also say that we get we become quite talented at not seeing need in front of us on a daily basis. Right. We have a lot of ways of shielding ourselves from, I used to do a lot of work in South Central and Watts, Compton, the hood and the barrio in LA. And it always fascinated me that the freeway system that runs, right through downtown LA and by the Staples Center, think of the Staples Center is off to your right if you're going, up to the foothills. And you look over there and they have, we're going to have Jay-Z next week and everything's great. You got red carpet service and valet parking. That freeway you're driving on, as you're up there, you're elevated. It's an overpass. Right below you is a whole beginning of the sprawl of that part of South Central that no one goes to, no one knows about, no one's seen. The Watts Tower, for example, is probably, besides the Hollywood sign, the most recognizable, amazing landmark that and the Capitol Records building. But I mean, I'm just talking about, there's like 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. But no one I knew when I started doing that had ever even gone down and seen it. It's just that in our lives, we have many, many ways of shielding ourselves from seeing not just the need, but seeing what you could do to be involved in it. And I think the calling that I get out of the Gospels is wake up to the need in your own life first. I have a sticker on my bathroom mirror that says, "Good morning, you're looking at the problem." Get up, look at what you can do to fix and make yourself more equipped, better, to help others. And work on that, but also keep your eyes open, keep your ears open. You mentioned, making a sort of call to action for the podcast. And for me, it's just ask yourself and then ask God as you understand him or her. But just ask that question, what can I do? And, I think when I read the Bible, I find that both in the Jewish tradition and also in the Christian, that question of who am I and what can I do seems to run through the whole book. That's like a central theme.
Awesome. Now, you mentioned working in Compton, and I was reading your bio, and tell our listeners a bit about the work you did with the gang members in East LA and teaching them Photoshop.
Oh yeah, that was a fun. Yeah, so I was doing some album art for that particular project was for Elektra Records, and I didn't do Photoshop. I used to go to this. They'd send you to a digital lab, and remember this is. Photoshop was like.
This is like back with like SideQuest discs and things.
They came on floppy disks
of.
and all that. Yeah. So I would go to this lab and I'd sit with a graphic designer, and I worked with. I still stay in touch with them. Maria McKenna and people at Warner Music, and I used to go there and sit with them, and I'd say, can we do this, that? Anyway, they'd do it, and we were doing things in Quark and all this stuff, and I just like saying Quark, but
But you work with the Crips, I mean, because Snoop is probably the world's most famous Crip.
Yeah. So one of these projects came up, and for some reason, I know what it was. There's a in this, all you guys out in LA, you'll know exactly where this is. Mm-hmm. So right where Sunset Boulevard runs into coming into Silver Lake, there's the famous Vista Theater. And it was a derelict theater, and these Latino guys took it, these two brothers, and they fixed it all up and renovated it, and they did a knockout job. So next to the Vista Theater was an empty space, and they put some computers in there. And I met one of the guys that was behind the Vista Theater project, and he said, I want to get gang kids off the street, and I want to teach them how to be graphic designers. And I was like, I said, that's great, because they already are.
They're already graffiti artists and tattoo
you see
artists.
The art,
and,
what they do to their cars and what they do to, and that's,
bikes.
It's everything. I mean, graphic design and graphic expression is huge in those communities. And so I was like, that's a great idea. So I had this project. I think I can say what it was. It was a album for Tracy Chapman called New Beginning. And Give Me One Reason to Live Here. Okay, so that album. And so it was kind of a big project, and Elektra was really like, we want to really do this great. And so I was back to them saying like, I'm going to go down to South Central and work with gang kids, and we're going to put the album art together. And they were like, no, they were like all panicky. And, but we did. And the cool thing is we had a really cool release party where we took the kids up to Tower Records with their moms. Because you remember, these kids, they could be the toughest, they could be, have barbed wire tattoos, and yet, you go, hey, bring your mom, and they all would. It was so sweet. I loved it. So we went up to Tower, and we had made this thing where we gave them all copies, and had a little thing together, and their parents. And the cool thing is fast forward, that's like 1996 or something. A lot of those kids are, putting their kids in school, doing really good. So, I saw you wrote down here, doing great by doing good. That was a slogan that didn't fly. We had once thought about that for Microboard, but it is a really important statement, because you will do your best by just doing good stuff. You don't have to make it so grandiose. Right. Sometimes just that random kind comment or that encouragement to someone could change the direction of their life, and that's not an exaggeration, not an exaggeration at all.
How did you, I know we're kind of backtracking on your story, but now how did you end up in California? Where were you born? Like, where did you start out?
I grew up in Belgium.
Okay.
And I was living in England in 1993, and I had most of my life up until that time had been in Europe. So I wasn't really, had no plans to come to live in the United States. My dad's Canadian, mom's American, but I pretty much grew up in Europe. And my brother started a band, and he went out to LA, said, we're going to have this band, and he got signed to Geffen Records like really quickly. And so suddenly he was doing, and so I had come back in 93, and I came to Connecticut, visited Craig and Sandy and Nicole and Ashley and Cece, the whole family. For a few days, we went to a tree farm. It was around Christmas. I didn't know much about Connecticut, but we went to a famous tree farm where we got a Christmas tree.
Probably Jones Tree Farm.
Yeah, I think it's probably
like
that
the
way.
Monopoly of farms here.
And it was on a little narrow, tiny road to get to it. Yeah. And so we went there and visited with them for a bit. Then I drove across country, which, I really didn't look at the weather very carefully. And went up
There's
to
this common theme of adventure. Like you're just like going for it.
Vancouver to visit. My mom and dad lived on Vancouver Island. Went down to LA, spent a week or two with my brother, and then never left. Stayed there.
When you were a kid, what did you dream about doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I always thought I could do anything. I didn't study a lot, didn't get great grades much of the time, as a result of that. But I always thought, I was interested in everything. I think I changed career ideas probably every few months.
More of a Da Vinci,
not
Renaissance
that
man?
No, just like, wow, that sounds really interesting, or that, and I was always eager to get involved in different things. Missions probably was I would have probably had an inclination towards that because my dad was involved in that, and I really loved it when I did something that he was
in mission work.
Proud
Your dad
of.
wasn't?
Yeah, he was more raising money and helping start.
Got it.
He did schools and things like that, and in Africa, also in India, and different places. But I know that I had always had a heart like maybe one day I'll be able to do that. I never felt like I was worthy of doing that. I think that's a trap for a lot of people. I'm going to wait until I feel holy enough or altruistic enough, or I'm going to wait for that aha moment spiritually, and then I'm going to do something. And it took me a long time to find out, no, the best way to do it is just get up and say, hey, I'm going to do it. And all that other stuff is what happens to you later,
Who inspired you the most growing up?
Well, I met a lot of cool people that definitely inspired me. But, my dad was really, a big part of that, because he also, I'll never get to where he was at because, he kind of could, he was one of those people that he was living it, in the public eye and in the private eye. And it was like, he just seemed to be really, so.
Where do you get your style from? Because, the fur coat you got is out of control.
I don't know.
Fashion, just.
Don't know.
Just from kind of being a global citizen?
Yeah.
Just kind of picking up
flea market
cultures and
flea market culture.
No, definitely stylish, man.
Flea market culture.
You're always sharp. Now, I did want to mention something about Microboard, and that is the Teddy Ruxpin connection.
Sure,
because a lot of people don't know that about Microboard.
Yeah. Well, again, it's the exciting part of Craig's story, which is, and there is he wrote it in a small book called Living in the Miracle, which is a great title. We should all live in the miracle. That's cool. But he set out, I wish Nicole were here to really, and Sandy, I wish Sandy were here to really give the, Sandy, you have to have Sandy on because she's also started Sandy's Helpers. So she's, right now there's, almost 200 women in Nigeria. This is real, and their families, and they're getting serious help, with agricultural, setting up the place for the animals. There's goats, there's chickens, and they're building sustainable careers for widows and single moms.
That's incredible. Is that the husbandry project you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, it's wild. Because, one of the, when you're giving money into nonprofits, one of the frustrating things is, how do you start making it sustainable and work from within the culture so that it can not just help the people you're trying to help, but help them help others. And, here's a crazy fact. This is a true statistic that if you can build sustainable enterprises with women, this is going to sound very gender biased, and it is gender biased. It's gender condemnation to us guys, definitely. statistically, women in Africa, when they're given assistance to get up and become sustainable, on average, put in 75 to 80% of what are the returns from their project back into that project, or helping another family get involved in that project. They're very village-oriented, very community-oriented.
They pay it forward.
Yeah, and guys in the same situation, it's about 18 to 20%. Wow. You know, we go to town and leave everybody behind. So it's a real it's an exciting project what Sandy's doing. But Teddy Ruxpin was Craig started a electronic service company, and one of the first things they did was repair, I guess, Teddies that didn't talk. I don't know what something is wrong with Teddy, you know, but they were repairing Teddy Ruxpin's and Mother Goose.
Wow. Yeah. So a lot of our listeners probably don't remember Teddy Ruxpin, but it was essentially this bear in the 80s.
Yeah.
And he kind of, you would put a cassette tape in him and he'd talk to you, his face would move. And,
yeah.
And you could put different tapes in there.
And
but
tell stories.
Yeah. They were expensive. We didn't have one, but I remember the cartoon. I mean, not the cartoon, the commercials for it.
Yeah.
And so it became part of like pop culture. So it was a pretty big deal. And you know, I always find it fascinating that just right here in the Valley, you know, Microboard was working on that and helping to fix those
to where it's at today, where it's like one of the most high tech contract manufacturing facilities in the U.S. and actually in some cases, it's probably even in globally, because some of the work they do is you know, verging on classified. They do stuff with, you know, they've worked with NASA. They worked in a lot of really complex medical aerospace, prototyping things. I remember once these guys came from IBM. This is back when Craig was there, and they had a very strange looking circuit board. And it was something that some scientist, some inventor, some Tesla type guy, not Tesla the car, but Tesla the original dude, that they had invented this new thing that was so protected and high security in its, you know, the rights to it, that, you know, they wanted a photograph taken, but I had to give them the memory card. I was already using digital cameras then, but I remember them saying, you can't keep the memory card. We'll get the picture, then we're going to erase that off there. And, you know, and you had to show your passport, and you had to go into like a clean space and, you know, sign papers just to look at this thing. So they're building some really amazing things with the mantra that is kind of how they vet their customers is we want to do life-changing, life-saving projects. We want to do things that make a difference that tip things to the positive. It's a differentiator about Microboard. It's like we want to be profitable because we want to give those profits to missions, but we also want to do things that are tipping the balance.
Right, moving the needle.
In the right direction.
Right direction.
Yep.
That's awesome that it's still happening. And how I enjoyed working with you on CT Makes It.
Yeah.
So
cool.
How did Microboard? I know Nicole's on some boards and stuff, and then she just kind of recruited you. But just kind of tell our listeners a little bit about that program and how Microboard's involved.
Well, there's Nicole is very involved with the team that the state of Connecticut put together with outside advisors from both within and outside the state to look at the existing and burgeoning crises of manufacturers slowing down or leaving the state of Connecticut, about not attracting new companies and entrepreneur manufacturing groups to see Connecticut as the manufacturing hotspot that it actually is, because it has a very strong manufacturing number of corridors. And also how to bring young people out of schools into the manufacturing experience as a really fulfilling, career path. Mm-hmm. So how do you get all of those particular very critical needs to how do you speak to them? And so there was the need for a campaign, and I came up with that one, which was just make it CT, make it possible, make it together, make it happen, make it CT. And the only other contribution I had that I really am committed to is there was some discussion at the state level about doing it with different professional ad groups and such. And I was like, can we do this with the kids you're trying to target? So I made a connection with Middlesex Community College, and I was like, I'd love to see all of the creative energy for this campaign come out of that community college experience, so that the people you're talking to or trying to talk to and is such a great potential audience, they're the ones creating it. It just makes sense. And we even talked about, there's a guy, Dan Nocera there, who's really cool. And I was like, yeah, we can have we're going to have a Make It Fest. So we're going to have this film festival about people making cool stuff. So it's kind of like Sundance, but it's about making things. And, so we got all these kids, and, some of those kids are inventing all kinds of crazy things and really, or have them do documentaries about some of the wild, interesting manufacturing places that are in Connecticut, like this fish farm that's in an old needle and thread factory, I think, in Bridgeport. There's this big warehouse, and when you go inside, it's a fish farm. So, get a camera. That's you can't miss.
So, I think it's fascinating that Microboard is still donating 100% of their profits, to this day. How can people find out more about Microboard and what they do there?
Well, microboard.com.
Now, that's a URL. I think we've talked about that before, that you guys got that a long time ago.
Registered it in 1994. And all you guys out there doing URL, domain stuff,
right?
That 93, 94 was it was kind of like the Lollapalooza of URLs, because everybody was like, wow, URLs, this is amazing. And one day, I've only had a couple of brainstorms that I remember, and that's another story. Anyway, anyway, back to the topic.
Right. Different podcast.
Yeah. I got up one morning and registered microboard.com. And I think it cost $17 or something. Yeah. And, but microboard.com, if you go to that website, there's a really good presentation about the humanitarian work. And maybe you'll see something there that will be inspiring to you. And if you're looking to manufacture, contract electronics manufacturing, the cool thing about doing it with Microboard is you can literally know that all of the, economic, above cost proceeds are, it's not just a percentage, but it all goes. Actually, it's probably more than 100%. I have to say that because there's a lot of people involved in the team, the family, and even friends who also make their own contributions. Right. Some of them quite notable contributions. So, at the end of the balance sheet, it's 100 plus. Yeah.
Well, Lee, for some reason, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about this. Let's say it's a parable, but it's a phrase you hear every now and then where people say, maybe it's a proverb, but it goes along the lines of, be careful how you treat strangers, because they're often angels in disguise. Mm-hmm. And I feel that way about you. Every single time that we've met, you just have this energy, this peace about you. You're out here doing good. You've dedicated. Somehow you figured out how to make a living but help people in really, really big ways. And I think that's very special. So I just wanted to say I admire that a lot. Thanks. About you. Can we end up here wrapping up the show with some inspiration for listeners out there? Because even in today's day and age, maybe more so, I feel like people are yearning for purpose. People can be super wealthy but still feel unfulfilled. it's not a monetary thing. It's are you living in your purpose? And so, can you share some words of wisdom for our listeners on that topic?
Being willing to, just saying yes. It's like the actual answer to that question is so simple that we miss it. Is that it really is about looking for the opportunity. And when people first hear that, they think, oh, it's like the Chinese menu. It's, there's so many items, and I don't know. And people, sometimes people will feel defeated by saying, I don't know which direction to go. I don't know who to trust. That type of thing. Trust is a big factor in the NGO and humanitarian, nonprofit world, because you go, well, I want whatever my contribution, no matter the size of the contribution, it's important to the person giving. And you think, I want this to do the best. But before you get to that question, just be willing, saying, yeah, I want to do something. And I've seen it so many times that I'm starting to think it's some sort of, spiritual law in the universe, that if you're willing and you look for opportunities to do something with the talents that you've been given, you'd be amazed at how quickly you'll find things come right to your front door. And the other thing is missions and work in this regard is not geographical. It's right in front of us. And so you go, how can I live this way? I think we do that at Microboard, is how can we live that way towards each other? And if we make a good effort at that, that'll just help us in how we deal with our things on the outside.
Awesome. You're absolutely doing great by doing good, Lee. Thank you for being on our show.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great message.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Mission Control. Until next time, this is Ramon Peralta with Peralta Design, and we launch brands.
Thank you for taking this journey with us. To learn more about Peralta Design and our work, go to www.peraltadesign.com and subscribe to keep up with the crew.